Hello everyone. Thank you for coming back to my channel. Today, we continue to follow the latest developments in the stormy love story between LyTuDiep and CEO James, where misunderstandings, trials, and perseverance are woven together day by day. In the previous episode, Diep was unfortunately attacked by a robber on a deserted road. All the precious jewelry her mother had given her, keepsakes filled with meaning and memories, were stolen. In a state of panic and pain, the fragile young woman forced herself to keep going, wandering alone in the cold night, hoping to find a flicker of hope, hoping that James was still searching for her. As for James, he never gave up. He put aside all his work and ignored the gossip and judgment, dedicating himself entirely to finding the woman he loves. In a final effort, James sought help from CEO Hùng, his childhood friend, a man with wide connections and the means to gather information from remote areas where Diep might be hiding or stranded. But while James was tirelessly searching, Trang, the woman with a hidden ambition to take Diep's place, began to make her move. She tried to convince him to go abroad with her. Trang was weaving a perfect scheme to help James forget the past while using Diep's disappearance to fill the void in his heart. Then, an unexpected twist occurred. A small, seemingly insignificant detail accidentally revealed a clue to Diep's whereabouts. Will James recognize it in time and follow the trail? Or will he be drawn into Trang's web of manipulation and wrong choices? Everything is heading toward a major turning point. Is their love strong enough to overcome the schemes, the loss, and the distance? Stay tuned for today's video to find out what surprising events await ahead. After a long period of putting everything aside just to search for Diep, James's work began to pile up. Meetings were postponed, important projects were delayed, and contracts left unsigned. His team had sent multiple urgent reports, but he barely paid any attention. In his mind, there was only one thing that mattered: finding Diep, whether alive or not. Today, James was finally forced to return to work. One of his key tasks was to visit the forest where he had pre-ordered a large batch of timber months earlier. He needed to personally inspect the quality, oversee the logging progress, and evaluate the harvest capacity to meet the production schedule for the upcoming line of luxury furniture. The road into the forest was deserted and coated with red dust. The wind rustled through the old tree canopies, sounding like nature's heavy sighs. While surveying the site with a few engineers and the forestry manager, James's phone buzzed in his pocket. A call from the police. The voice on the line was calm, but it sent a chill through James's entire body. "We've just discovered a decomposing female body at the foot of a mountain, near the area where Diep was last reported missing. No identification has been found, and due to over a week of decomposition, the body is difficult to identify. We need you to come confirm." James froze. His eyes stared blankly ahead, and his legs nearly gave out. The hand holding the phone trembled. The time frame they mentioned matched too closely with Diep's disappearance. 1 week. 1 week of no word. 1 week of fragile hope stretched thin. His heart clenched. The entire journey from the forest to the police station, James said nothing. The vehicle sped through the rugged roads, but his mind was spinning with 100 questions. Could it be? No. It can't be Diep. It can't end like this. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. Deep inside, he could only pray. Pray that the woman wasn't Diep. That wherever she was, however she was, as long as she was still alive, he would find her. Upon arrival, he was led to the identification area. The sharp scent of chemicals mixed with the stench of death made his stomach churn. The body was covered with a white sheet, revealing only a partially decomposed face. James bit his lip hard, taking slow steps forward, his heart torn between terror and a fragile sliver of hope. And then, as he looked closer, a breath escaped his tightened chest. Though there were some similarities, this was not her. It wasn't Diep. He was sure. James stood still for several minutes. It felt like falling into a bottomless pit and then being yanked back just before hitting the ground. His body was exhausted, his legs barely holding him up. But deep within, a faint light still flickered. Diep wasn't dead. She was still out there. Just not yet found. On the ride away from the police station, James sat quietly in the back seat, eyes gazing out the window. The late afternoon sky was gloomy, streaks of sunlight slipping through the treetops. The scenery outside passed like a slow-motion film. He told himself, as long as she is alive, even in the most remote corners of the earth, even in the wildest forests, he will not give up. Today, he almost lost her all over again. But today also reminded him, hope still remains. And as long as that hope exists, James will keep searching. He will not stop. Dui de la ban dike tieng on trang trong va kem suk qua don ban ban kung kap. After the devastating shock at the police station, where James nearly had to face the possibility that the body discovered was Diep, his mind felt utterly shattered. The long days of hoping, the sleepless nights, the moments when he thought he was close to a lead, all had led to a dead end. Diep remained missing, without a trace, without a single sign that she still existed in this vast world. That evening, James left the police station in a state of despair unlike anything he had ever known. He didn't return home. Instead, he quietly walked into a small bar on the outskirts of town, where flickering lights and pounding music might drown out the screams echoing in his heart. He drank. He drank like he had never drunk before. Glass after glass. In his mind, there was only Diep, her gentle face, her sorrowful eyes, and the smile that had once been his anchor. Each gulp of liquor burned his throat, but it was the only way to numb the pain, even for a moment. By midnight, he collapsed onto the bar counter, his body drained, his soul in tatters. Just then, his phone began to ring. It was Trang, project manager of a troubled assignment, calling to ask for guidance. A bartender noticed the call going unanswered and picked it up. Hello? The owner of this phone is passed out drunk at our bar. If you know him, please come pick him up. Trang froze for a moment. Then, without hesitation, she left her house in the middle of the night, not forgetting to apply some light makeup and adjust her dress. She realized this was her chance, a rare opportunity to enter James's life when he was at his weakest. When she arrived, she saw James slumped over the table, his face flushed from the alcohol, his glassy eyes still filled with tears. Her heart trembled. Gently, she helped him up and guided him to her car, taking him home. James's house was quiet. His mother was away on a business trip. It was just him and her. Trang led James to his room. He was heavy, barely conscious, but his lips kept whispering. Diep, don't leave me. Don't go. Diep. I'm begging you. Each agonized plea was like a blade to Trang's heart. But instead of stepping back, her desire to possess him only grew, at any cost. She sat at the edge of the bed, gently brushing his messy hair. She whispered, James. I'm here. It's not Diep, it's me. I won't leave you. Then she leaned down, her hands reaching to undo his shirt buttons, her eyes full of intent. She thought, if something happened between them tonight, he would have no choice but to take responsibility. He would have to choose her. There'd be no turning back. But just then, James stirred. His eyes fluttered open, bloodshot from the alcohol, but still holding a glimmer of clarity. He saw Trang hovering over him, her hand on his chest, his shirt half unbuttoned. In a flash, he pushed her away. "Stop it, Trang," he said, voice raspy but firm. "Please, don't do this. You know I don't love you. My heart belongs to Diep. Even if she's gone, even if you're here, that won't change." Trang froze. James's eyes were no longer clouded by alcohol. They were the eyes of a man who still held true to his vow, despite the agony and despair. He turned away, murmuring almost to himself, "I don't want to do something I'll regret. I don't want Diep to misunderstand, if she ever comes back." That single sentence was like a verdict crashing down on Trang's soul. Wounded. Humiliated. But above all, forced to accept the painful truth that no matter how hard she tried, she could never replace Diep in James's heart. Silently, Trang stood up. She said nothing. She walked out of the room without looking back. That night, rain began to fall, on the porch, on the road beneath her feet, and straight into the unspoken ache of a woman who had just lost her final illusion. New ban kindman ret gone, tu de video, emo tai YouTube hay hin on thumbnail fu hop, min ko the jup ban nai. The next morning, James woke up in the familiar comfort of his room, his head pounding like a drum. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, forcing him to squint, and his throat felt parched while his body ached as if he'd been run over. He sat up, hollow and numb. Part of the previous night was a complete blur, erased by alcohol. He only remembered arriving at a bar, drinking heavily, and then, nothing but a blank. James had no idea who had brought him home. He had no memory of Trang being in his room, sitting by his bedside, or nearly crossing the line while he was unconscious. The house was quiet, with no signs of anything out of the ordinary. Everything felt as if he had simply gotten drunk, come home, and passed out. After showering and nibbling on a piece of bread, James drove to the lumber factory, where a key material inspection was scheduled. Upon arrival, he saw Trang already waiting, looking as fresh and poised as ever, even greeting him with a bright smile. The entire morning, they worked together as usual. James spoke to her politely and professionally, just like he always had. Trang quietly exhaled in relief. She quickly realized James remembered nothing from the night before, nothing about her holding him, nothing about the unbuttoned shirt, and certainly nothing about her calculated attempt to push boundaries while he was lost in intoxication. Instead of feeling awkward or ashamed, Trang chose silence. She acted as if nothing had happened. Partly out of pride, but more so because she knew, if James ever recalled everything, he might never look her in the eye again. While they were reviewing the contract and technical specifications in a small meeting room at the factory, Trang suddenly stopped writing. She looked up at James with a softer expression than usual. "James," she said gently, "do you ever wonder, what if Diep never comes back?" James froze, his pen halted midair. That question, though spoken tenderly, pierced straight into the wound that hadn't yet healed in his heart. He didn't respond right away. Trang watched him, her voice growing even softer. "I don't mean any harm. It's just, sometimes I think maybe it's time to let go. You've done so much. Maybe a change of scenery, going somewhere far away, like abroad, might help you forget all the pain. I could go with you, if you'd let me." The air suddenly felt heavier. James put his pen down, his eyes gazing out the window, lost in thought. A long silence followed. Then he turned back, his voice calm but resolute. "Trang, thank you. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. Because of Diep." Trang opened her mouth to say something, but James continued, every word etched from deep within his soul. "If one day, Diep never comes back, I'll still wait. For the rest of my life. If it isn't her, I won't love anyone else, much less marry someone else. My heart has no room for anyone else. Trang fell silent, staring at the man who had just spoken those words. With unwavering eyes and a voice steady as stone, she finally understood. All her efforts, all her plans, all her waiting, meant nothing. Because to James, there would only ever be one woman he vowed to love with all his heart, and that woman was not her. James had just finished speaking to Trang, a final, resolute declaration that left no room for any other hope. The air in the room grew heavy. Trang lowered her gaze, trying to hide the flicker of despair in her eyes, while James remained silent, his mind drifting once more to somewhere far away, where the image of Diep still lingered, the woman he never stopped searching for. Suddenly, the ringtone of his phone shattered the stillness. James looked at the screen. It was CEO Hùng. He quickly answered, a strange feeling rising in his chest, a stirring he couldn't quite name. James, it's me, Hung's voice came through, hurried and breathless. I just got a tip from a contact in a rural area up north. They said they saw a girl who looks a lot like Diep. She showed up in a small commune about 100 kilometers away. She was wearing an old white-out dye, wandering near a half-abandoned market. No one knows where she came from. But her face, her figure, it's very similar to Diep. Very similar. James nearly leapt to his feet. Are you sure? Which commune? Do you have an address? His voice was urgent, his heartbeat thunderous. I'm sending you the location now. It's Tanton Commune, about an hour and a half's drive from here. People said she appeared a few times but never spoke to anyone. Seems like she might be suffering from memory loss or deep depression. I think you need to go. Now. Thank you, Hùng. Thank you so much. James nearly shouted, overwhelmed with emotion. He ended the call and turned to Trang, who still sat frozen, unable to grasp what had just happened, and said quickly, Trang, I'm sorry. I have to go right now. Without waiting for a response, James rushed out of the meeting room. He ran down the hallway, down the stairs, sprinting to the parking lot like a man who had just glimpsed a light at the end of a dark tunnel. His car roared to life, the engine matching the pounding rhythm in his chest. He didn't know what lay ahead. Could it really be Diep? Was this truly a real hope, or just another painful disappointment? But he knew one thing, even if there was just a 1% chance, he had to take it. He couldn't let another opportunity slip away. The car sped out of the factory grounds, merging onto the endless stretch of highway. James's eyes locked onto the GPS. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight. The wind howled outside, and in his heart, only one thought echoed. Diep, if you're still out there, please wait for me. This time, I will find you. Will James be able to find Diep? Will they finally reunite after all the pain and longing? Is the lead that Hùng provided truly the key to bringing them back together? Or will it turn out to be yet another cruel twist of fate? Let's find out, in the next episode.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, hiện tại thì mình vừa mới hoàn thành video về câu chuyện quản lý tử Diệp và seduce. Hôm qua thì do không kịp tiến độ để lên video về nội dung của Diệp với Diep nên mình có lên video về nội dung quản lý hoài ca. Nhưng mình thấy là nội dung lý hoài ca chắc là do kiểu mình cũng mới lên ở trên kênh mình nên mọi người cũng chưa có xem nhiều ấy, nên cái lượt xem nó khá là thấp. Nên hôm nay mình đã cố gắng mình làm một video về nội dung về lý tử Diệp cho mọi người xem. Mong rằng mọi người có thể xem video sau đó đóng góp thêm ý kiến cho mình để cho kênh mình càng ngày càng hoàn thiện và phát triển hơn. Tại vì kênh mình thì dù sao nó cũng đang là một kênh mới nên là cũng chưa có hoàn thiện được. Cũng rất mong nhận được ý kiến đóng góp của mọi người để mình có thể rút kinh nghiệm và làm cho kênh trở nên hoàn thiện hơn. Và nếu như yêu quý kênh thì mọi người hãy like, share video cũng như là hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó để lại bình luận và nhớ bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mà kênh mình ra nhé.